Welcome to Energy Quest. It's been a while. I miss the viewers and I miss being in this seat because there's always exciting and interesting things to discuss on here. Welcome again. Today we have something very interesting to talk about. We're going to talk more about the cylinder recirculation policy that was launched by the National Petroleum Authority. I think I'm most excited because of the person who's going to talk about it. He's the head of gas at the National Petroleum Authority, but he's not just the head of gas, but he was on our Energy Transition Plan Committee, right? So everything he tells us about transition is from the core, from the people who actually took us from zero to where we are now. So sit tight and enjoy this conversation. Right. Obed, you're welcome.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you for having me on your prestigious platform.
Okay. So, head of gas. So, tell us about your role at NPA now.
All right, thank you. So, as head of gas for commercial regulation, it is my responsibility to make sure that the government policies on promotion of LPG, as well as CNG, that is compressed natural gas, is actualized. And so, you mentioned the cylinder recirculation model. It is the vehicle through which government wants to achieve its goals of 50% access to LPG by the year 2030. And so we are leading the effort in the promotion of LPG, promotion of the use of LPG in that regard. On the CNG side also, we see CNG as a transition fuel under our energy transition plan. And so it is our responsibility as a gas directorate to implement CNG for use in transportation in natural gas vehicles or NGVs. And so very soon we'll be having our CNG at some of our refilling stations and also dedicated stations to serve our vehicular users as well. And so these are the two main fronts that we push at the Gas Directorate in terms of our work at Gas Directorate.
We have lots of taxis now that use LPG, right?
Yes.
Does this imply that those same cars can use CNG?
Okay, so it depends on how you retrofit the vehicle to use whichever fuel. For LPG, that is liquefied gas. And so the composition of how you retrofit the vehicle is quite different from a CNG, which is compressed natural gas. And so yes, it depends on how you retrofit the vehicle. But then any vehicle that uses petrol or diesel can be retrofitted to use either LPG or compressed natural gas.
Oh, interesting. Yes. But will it be cheaper?
In terms of the initial cost of retrofitting, yes, there may be some quite cost there. But in terms of the energy savings or the benefits, we know both natural gas and LPG are more sustainable in terms of emissions. They don't emit as much as petrol and diesel emits. So in terms of that, we get that environmental benefit. That is the first. Secondly, research has shown that LPG, for instance, versus petrol is more efficient. Vehicles that have switched from diesel, the truckers and the taxi drivers will tell you that after having switched from diesel or petrol to LPG, they're able to go a further distance with the equivalent of what they would have used in petrol and diesel with LPG.
Okay, no, yes. So I'm asking for my taxi friends. Beyond the further distance, what am I going to spend as a taxi driver in terms of, comparing running a diesel car or being more efficient or more responsible to the environment and using the CNG?
Also, I think they've also said the vehicle actually runs more efficiently in terms of the vehicle performance.
It's smoother.
It's smoother and all of that. And so there are several benefits to, switching to LPG rather than using of diesel.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I'll zoom in on CRM, which is our priority today. CRM. We've been waiting for it forever, because this policy has been talked about year on year and year. I mean, I can't recall, maybe 10 years, maybe. It's been pretty long.
Yes.
What was holding us back?
You're right. It goes back, it goes back as far as the year 2013. 2013 was when we started the National LPG Promotion Policy, which actually birthed the CRM. I remember I was at the Ministry of Energy then, and we did a program, the Rural LPG Promotion Program. What we did was we distributed cylinders and stoves in rural and peri-urban areas. The idea was to whip up the demand for LPG in those areas so that it will incentivize the market players, the LPG marketing companies and dealers to set up in these areas and then bring LPG closer to people.
Okay.
And so we went around distributing cylinders and stoves. Everywhere we went, we identified a dealer who was close to the area so that they would provide the refilling services in that regard. However, we realized the refilling services was not forthcoming, and then most of the beneficiaries ended up, packing their cylinders and stoves somewhere and reverted back to the charcoal and firewood, because the distances to refilling was far.
Okay.
So, for instance, we went to Garutimpani, where we distributed about 1,500 cylinders and stoves. We identified a dealer in Boko who was supposed to set up a station at the Garutimpani, but initially start with refilling by coming to pick the cylinders on market day, going to fill at Boko and then bringing it back, Bolgatanga or Boko, and bringing it back. But then they were not just interested. Of course, they are business people. They look at the cost-benefit analysis. They look at whether they will make margins and all of that. And so the distances to refill in that situation led to the discontinued use of the LPG we sent to them. And so we started to think around to find ways through which we could bring LPG to such places without having to set up a refilling station. Because it costs to set up a refilling station. The smallest of refilling stations, if you want to set today, will cost you in between $1 million to 2 million Ghana cedis.
Okay.
And so for the businessman, of course, for all businesses, if I'm going to put a station in Garutimpani, I want to make sure there's demand there, enough demand for me to recoup my investment within the shortest possible of time. And so we, as government, and we wanting people to use LPG, saw that as a barrier or as a key barrier.
Yeah.
Because the first thing is the LPG has to be there for people to decide whether they want to switch or not. And so we thought that once we take that barrier away, we would be able to get people to now begin thinking of using LPG. So that was what drove us, government and the ministry at that point, to begin thinking around how we can change the model. Okay, accessibility was what started this whole discussion around CRM. And so we went to Cote d'Ivoire. We looked around, and just Cote d'Ivoire, our neighbors Cote d'Ivoire, they have been doing the cylinder recirculation model for quite a while. So we went to study their model, and then we realized it's something we could implement here. We came around, and then we started preparing the policy from 2013. And there were up and downs in the preparation of the policy.
Long journey.
Yes. There were initial agitations, and then somewhere fast forward to the year 2017.
Yeah.
I think that was when the atomic explosion happened. So when it happened, Cabinet inquired from the Ministry of Energy how we could manage the distribution of LPG going forward. The policy was ready, and so we submitted it to Cabinet, and it was approved for implementation.
That's 2017.
That's October 2017.
Okay.
So most people usually say the atomic incident was what led to the introduction of CRM, but the policy had been in preparation for a while. It just gave it the impetus, if you may, for us to introduce it. So Cabinet approved it in 2017, and like you said, since 2017, it's been a long journey till today. So today, I can tell you, we are good to go. And
we are finally there.
CRM is here to stay. Yes.
Okay, so CRM, that's Cylinder Recirculation Model.
Yes.
So a long time ago, when I was a little girl,
yes,
my father used to run the system where he had a refill, like a shop, where I'd always find cylinders there. I had people bringing in cylinders, picking up another. There were issues of, and you don't have the Goil cylinder, and I brought Goil, and you don't have Shell, and it was a whole, I do remember all that he was running that time. I remember he had a pickup truck. He used to go around and return people's cylinders. So when I read about or I heard about recirculation, I thought, is this more like what my father used to do, or is there more to it, So tell me, is it the ancient story we are bringing back? Is it any different? But if it's the ancient story and it's what my father was doing when I was a little girl, then it means we've done exactly the same before, but we let it go for a reason. Why are we back? So first tell me, what does the whole model entail? What does the whole policy entail? And let's compare it if it's any different.
Okay. All right. So cylinder recirculation model is a model for distribution of LPG where you have branded cylinders, which go throughout the value chain. So they start, of course, by being produced by a cylinder manufacturing company.
Okay.
Then it goes to a bottling plant, which then fills it. These bottling plants are usually automated facilities that have a carousel that can fill, let's say, 24 cylinders per hour or something of that sort. And so these facilities fill the cylinders in bulk, and then they are moved to holding facilities, which are usually distributor facilities. And then from the distributor facilities, you could have retailers who would also pick a few quantities of these cylinders. And then they would retail. They are the ones who usually would interface with the consumers. And so once the consumer picks the cylinder and then uses the gas and returns the cylinder, it goes back through the same chain back to the bottling plant.
Back to the distributor.
Yes.
To the bottling plant. It's filled again.
It is filled again, and then it comes back.
Cycle.
So that cycle of the cylinder starting from the bottling plant, coming all the way to the consumer, and going back to that chain, back to the bottling plant, is the cycle. That makes it the cylinder recirculation model.
Okay.
And so you're right. It is something that we used to do before, not in the same form as what we are going to do now. But yes, I think in the late 80s or early 90s, a form of cylinder recirculation used to be there, where you had Goyle and Total and some companies have some cylinders.
It was branded.
Yes,
right?
they were branded. That was when even GCMC, the Ghana Cylinder Manufacturing Company, for instance, was set up to produce cylinders to feed, that whole system. And so yes, a sort of it was there previously, but it, for instance, did not have the bottling plant, the large-scale bottling plants doing the filling activity as at we want to do now. Secondly, the challenges, one of the reasons why it died off was because most of the cylinders were not, coming back to the bottling plants for refilling.
Okay.
And so the cylinders kept gradually reducing. And so then it became non-sustainable for
it wasn't coming back, as in when the consumer uses it.
Yes. So
they don't return it.
They don't return.
So how do they get a new one?
Okay. So then that begs the question. So some of the cylinders, from the research we read, ended out of the country. So people took some out of the jurisdiction. Yes. And also, like I said, there were no further investment because the cylinders were not returning back to the refilling stations. For the refilling stations, they only made their margins when they refilled these cylinders. So once the cylinders were not returning, it became difficult for them to further invest into the cylinders. So those were some of the challenges that were fraught with that old
But how are you
system.
solving it this time?
And solving it going forward. For instance, now you would realize we've introduced what we call the cylinder investment margin. So instead of, for instance, just leaving it for the business people to determine when and which quantities of cylinders they buy, the government, NPA, and the Ministry of Energy has oversight on that fund to look at how we inject cylinders into the CRM. So we have a fair idea of the cylinders we need to start. We have this fair idea of how gradually we introduce cylinders into the model as we go, so that there's not the issues of shortages of cylinders and all of that once we have fully rolled out under the CRM. That's one of the measures.
So that margin is being paid by the consumer?
Yes, that margin is being paid by the consumer.
And who does it go to? Because you have a number of bottlers and who's going to? Okay,
so this is a structure we've put in place. We submitted a proposal to Parliament for addition of $80 per metric ton into the price build-up of LPG at the supplier's premium.
It's a lot, oh. Yes. Consumer will beat you up.
It is a lot. No, but so we added the $80, but prior to adding the $80, you realize recently we did something we call the LPG tender. In coming up with this, we realized with the full cost recovery policy we implement in the petroleum downstream, which means for every service provider, there has to be a margin that caters for their investment and operational cost. And so we realized bottling plant operation would need a margin. So what we did was we look at ways of trying to reduce the price of LPG so that it gives us a space to introduce the margin.
How do you reduce price of LPG
this is what
deregulated market?
So this is what we did. previously, the BDCs, the LPG BDCs used to import in smaller parcels. What we did was we put all of our import into one basket, and then we did a tender. So when we did the tender, it dropped the premiums down from around $100 to $130 per metric ton, all the way to $30 per metric ton.
Oh, wow.
That was a huge drop.
Very impressive.
Very impressive. You won't believe even the recent tender, how low it dropped. It has dropped further down to about $19 per metric ton.
Okay, you're working.
So that is the power of, economies of scale.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, the savings we made allowed us to introduce the bottling plant margin and then the cylinder investment margin, which is the combined $80 per metric ton, without necessarily increasing the price of LPG. Okay. So yes, we are conscious of the fact that bottling plant margin had to be inserted in the price build-up. The cylinder investment margin to pay for the cylinders had to be inserted in the price build-up. But we did the tender in the first place, and then we had that space, and then we introduced the margin so that it wouldn't increase the price of petroleum product.
Okay, I'm trying to understand it better. So
yes.
if I'm running a bottling plant,
yes,
does the NPA pay me that fund, or is taken off? How do I?
Okay, so this is how we implementing it. So the tender, the BDC who wins the tender, of course, is the BDC that sells to other BDCs. So when they sell to other BDCs or the LPGMCs, they pay the $80 per metric ton into the fund, a designated account by the NPA, which is then used for procurement of the cylinders. If you are a BDC that owns a bottling plant, or if you are a bottling plant and then you're buying the product, you withhold $44 per metric ton. That is the bottling plant margin of the $80. Then you pay the $36 per metric ton only into the cylinder investment fund. You only come to claim from the fund once you have invested in cylinders, and then your submission has been vetted and then seen to be accurate.
So the NPA end consumers are buying cylinders.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So let's say consumers are buying the cylinders that will be used for this circulation.
Yes.
So I no more need to buy a cylinder myself, which is a positive to the CRM idea.
Yes.
And then I'm only getting the gas that is within the cylinder.
Exactly.
I do not own it. I return it.
Yes.
And get another one.
Exactly.
The bottling plant does not own it, or do they own the cylinder?
They hold it in trust for the people, for government and the people.
Okay.
In the sense that, you see, in our current model, there is no responsibility for cylinders. You are a consumer, you may own your cylinder, but if you take it to the filling station and then, let's say the valve, the black seal on the top is damaged, and the refilling station asks you to pay 3 C's, and you say you don't have 3 C's, they'll give it back to you to go home.
Yeah. And the safety is on your head,
and that is what leads to some of the accidents in our homes, you know. And so what we are saying is that going forward, we want to make sure that before a cylinder ends up in somebody's home, it is safe to use.
Safe.
Okay. And so we are placing that responsibility in the hands of the bottling plant. Okay. So they have some maintenance cost and all of that build up into their operational cost. So they would be responsible. So the reason why we are branding it is that we want to know that New Gas or GOIL is responsible the moment we see a cylinder involved in an accident in somebody's home. Okay, so then there's proper responsibility under the CRM. And they will do this because they put the cylinders through several checks. First of all, under the CRM, government has introduced by policy that the cylinder manufacturing companies in Ghana, we have about 4 of them. They are going to manufacture the cylinders. So we are not going to import cylinders.
Import.
Okay, so that is a good thing.
Creating employment
in local products. And so once they produce the cylinders, the bottling plants will procure, it will be branded in their colors, they procure and everything. Now, once you use the cylinder and it comes back, it undergoes a process before it is filled. So they first check for major dents. If there are major dents around the cylinder, they will pull it aside. If it has to be worked on at the bottling plant, they have a yard where they can work on it and then put it back on the machine. However, if it is a serious dent that has to be corrected with some fireworks or hot works, it has to go to the bottling plant. And so every time your cylinder comes to the bottling plant, they'll first do that, then it gets onto the carousel and goes through the process. It is checked for the leakage, if there is any. Then if it's no leakage, it goes through a washer system.
Okay.
The cylinder is washed.
It's cleaned. Okay.
Yes, it's cleaned, before it gets to the refilling scale, and then it is refilled. Once it is refilled, they put a cap on top, like you buy bottled water and there's a rubber on top, which shows that nobody has tampered with it. Exactly. Before it comes to you, the consumer. Okay. So under the CRM, it guarantees that the cylinders that consumers will be using will be more safe. And that's the reason why we're preaching that CRM would, introduce more safety into the use of LPG.
Yeah.
So yes, regarding cylinders, then now the bottling plant has that responsibility of maintaining the cylinder on behalf of the people or on behalf of the government.
Wow.
Yes.
No, this is true regulation. Like yes, this is beautiful. I think the NPA has really done well covering back to back and then crossing all the T's.
Yeah.
Good job, Obed.
Thank you, Leslie.
Okay, but beyond the positives, I was noting that down. I noted employment, which is a big plus. I noted safety, and I think another exciting part that all round the chain we're happy about will be that indirect price regulation, because if you are putting it together, the aggregation is giving us better pricing, right?
Definitely.
So yes, these are excellent pluses to the idea of CRM, but there are challenges.
Yes.
Okay. I want us to look at it on both angles.
Okay.
First, on the private sector or the business person.
Okay.
Then we look at the consumer.
Okay.
What I have seen and known people in this industry do is to inject well or to invest well in the development of any station that they put their hands on. So you have LPGMCs that have invested in stations.
Yes.
Even recently, even just before you rolled out and all that.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do with these stations? What happens to all that investment?
Okay.
Unless, I don't think we are going to run both ends. We're fully going CRM, right? So what happens to these investments? Just tell us.
Okay, I'll come to that. So let me start by saying we recognize the role of indigenous businesses who have built this industry. In fact, if you look at the performance of indigenous businesses, not just for LPG it's entirely, local companies. But even if you look at the oil side or the white fuel side, I think the indigenous companies, Goil, Allied Oil and Co. are doing very well.
Yeah.
And so the role of indigenous companies in our petroleum downstream industry cannot be underscored. And for that reason, from the beginning of the preparation of this policy, and I can say that because I sat at the Ministry of Energy when we were preparing this policy, we have always engaged the relevant stakeholders, including the LPG Marketing Association of Ghana,
AOMC.
and then AOMC, and then even GLEBOA, the LPG operators, as well as even the tanker drivers.
Okay.
So they've always been part of preparation of the policy, the conversation, and even shaping up the final framework or the final plan that we are implementing now. Okay. And so I just wanted to put that in place. We also recognize that with the LPG side, as I mentioned, all of the companies in petroleum downstream are local companies. And as you mentioned, they have built infrastructure, they have stations, several stations across the country. By way of that, we have always said that NPA does not own a single refilling station. So there's no way NPA can implement this on its own.
Yeah.
Secondly, it doesn't make sense for you to go and bring new people who do not have any experience in handling LPG, especially as LPG is a sensitive product.
Yeah.
And so we've always maintained that we want to use the existing service providers and also utilize their existing infrastructure in the distribution, whether it's CRM or the old model. And so what we have said, or what the framework which we all prepared together, the final framework we had was that we would convert the current refilling stations into what you call cylinder distribution outlets. Okay. Where we will drop cylinders, and then from these cylinder distribution outlets, we can pick smaller quantities and then take it to the reseller outlets, which will be in the localities or your communities. So let me just further explain. The primary business of an LPG dealer or marketing company is to sell gas.
Yeah.
I tell people it is not to own filling stations although the filling station is the infrastructure through which you sell the gas. And so for us, if you are having a filling station now, and let's say you are selling, let's say 5 tons of LPG a month, all we are saying, or all that is changing is that you can still sell the same 5 tons. Just that this time, we are not bringing you a bulk tank for you to fill in smaller quantities in cylinders. We are bringing you cylinders, the equivalent of the same 5 tons, or even more. So that from that facility, now, instead of you to just sit down and wait for somebody to carry their cylinder and come from 5 kilometers to your station to fill, you can even have, or you can engage a reseller in that person's community and put a small cage there, and then go and drop 10 there, go and drop 15 here, and even the village close, where you probably did not have any customers, put the cage there and able to serve them by going to put some 5-10 cylinders there. And so for every dealer who wants to sell gas, this should make sense.
It's a plus.
It is a plus because it gives you opportunity for you to reach more people without having to set up a filling station. As I explained to you initially, because the dealer in Boko and Bolga, they thought the Timpani, the demand there was not so much to set up a station. But if they had a cage there where they can go and drop a few cylinders, the cage does not cost so much to construct, you know. And so that is the whole model. For us,
infrastructural cost is lesser now.
It's lesser. It's so fast, so lesser.
No.
The good thing for us is the bottling plants have already invested. At least we have about 4 bottling plants already, as I mentioned. And so for us now, what we need are the retailing outlets. Okay, so we need our dealers, our LPG marketing companies, to transition these facilities to hold the cylinders. So, for instance, your filling station in, let's say, Oyarifa, where you fill, we want to transition it to a station which can hold, let's say, 500 to 1,000 cylinders sitting there. Just like the FMCG business, like Guinness and all other products.
Yeah.
At the depot, they may put a small fridge there where you can go and buy 1 or 2, but it's practically a depot, right? And then from there, they will serve the beer bars in the community. It's a similar model. So what we are saying is that that facility now should have, let's say, 500 cylinders, which is the same volume they sell. And then in the communities, they can go and put a cage by maybe some kiosk, provision kiosk, once NPA.
Now it's safe.
It's
so
safe
it can be anywhere.
Because most of the accidents, which I'm sure we'll come back to later, in the LPG space, occurs when there's a filling activity. Either they are filling for a consumer, there's exposure, or maybe they are filling from a tank. A tank comes to, let's say, discharge into, let's say, the storage tank at the facility, and then maybe some vehicle is passing by, fire is not arrested, and it causes an accident. So the filling activity is not there anymore. Once you have cylinders well filled, well maintained, capped, sitting there, it poses no risk or no security issue. And so then further down in the community, they would go there and then they will have exchange points at those areas as well.